Hey friends, welcome to another week of the JOANNA WHALEY podcast. We have an awesome show for you, and today we are talking all things LGBTQ. We're talking all things Pride Month and Father's Day. The tension of being a trans person during Father's Day. We are going to have an awesome conversation today. Right now, we have people on TikTok Live at JOANNA WHALEY Music. We also have people watching on Facebook right now. You can also go find me at JOANNA WHALEY. Before we get started today, you can join me on Patreon. That's patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. You can also join our support groups that I'm hosting for LGBTQ people working through spiritual questions. You can go to joannawhaley.com/support. And on the other side of the music, we are going to begin a conversation about Father's Day and being a trans person. We're so glad you're here. Here we go. On the other side of the music, we'll get started.
Can't get it out of my head. Can't get it out of my head. I will never be straight, but you say I'll be great if it's out of my head. Helped you all impossible.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the JOANNA WHALEY podcast. I'm so happy you are here. If you are someone who watches this podcast live on TikTok at JOANNA WHALEY Music, welcome. I'm so glad you're all here. There's plenty of you, lots of you interacting each and every week. I've been so honored and happy to see all of you here. Also, for people for the first time ever, I've started streaming the live recording of this podcast on Facebook because so many people on Facebook have asked me if I have a live stream of the podcast there. So thank you so much for joining me today. We are diving into Pride Month stuff. It is Pride 2024 when we're recording this podcast. And if you're new to the show, I kind of take the first 20 to 30 minutes and just kind of tell you some ideas and give you some thoughts that I have on Pride Month and specific topics. And today we're talking about being a trans woman and being a dad, because this is going to air on all the streaming networks on Father's Day. Now, when this is being recorded, it isn't Father's Day, but we're getting so close to Father's Day as it's being recorded. So throughout the show, if you're somebody who listens live, you can go to TikTok.com or whatever, go to TikTok and find me at JOANNA WHALEY Music, or go to Facebook and find me at JOANNA WHALEY or JOANNA WHALEY Music, and you can watch the whole like recording of the podcast live. So I'm happy you all are here. And so today what I would do, I want to start off today's podcast and really talk about something that I have wrestled to talk about for a long time. Let me bring you back. If you're new to my show, if you're new to my content, if you just found me, I was an evangelical megachurch pastor for 20 years of my life before I came out as a transgender woman. And I went through conversion therapy 3 times. For about 15 years of my life, I went through conversion therapy to all try to alter my gender or my gender expression, right? And so I found myself in a place where I believed everything that my church was telling me. I believed with all of my heart that what my church was telling me was the absolute truth. Like, I needed to repent of my sin. I'm using huge air quotes for people who don't watch this podcast, huge air quotes, because I was being told to repent of my sin and like turn from my sinful ways because I felt like a woman on the inside. But I knew that how I presented to the world as a man, as a boy, was just not me. And so I'm going to share a story with you that's a little bit difficult for me to talk about, because there have been moments where I was afraid to tell this story. But today's the day. I'm going to tell this story because the story matters. When I was a young pastor, I became a pastor like at the age what was the age? Probably like 18 or 19. I became a pastor. Yeah, no training, no seminary. Good luck, you're a pastor. I became a pastor when I was young. And early in my pastor years, I was a single pastor. I was doing the whole church thing. But I had this like dream, and I wanted to be a dad. And you might be thinking, if you're listening to this, like, what do you mean you want to be a dad? You're a trans woman. Well, like at the time I was presenting male to the world, right? So I watched parents in the world. I watched moms and I watched dads and everything in between. I watched them parent kids, and I thought that was so awesome. And I had this dream. That I wanted to be a dad, even though I wrestled with my own gender myself. And so I had this dream, and in 2015, that dream came to life. I became a dad. My oldest daughter gifted me with the role of dad. And yeah, I was in the closet at this time. I was a closeted trans person. And I loved it. I loved being dad. I loved like taking my daughter like to the park and like going on vacations and doing the whole like dad thing, right? I loved it. And in 2017, my middle daughter came along, and she gifted me again with the role of being a dad of 2 kids and 2 girls. And then again in 2019, my third child came along, and I was living this like parental dream. I had my kids and I was enjoying it. I was loving it. It was awesome. And I remember like the first time we like bought a house, and I remember kind of like having a moment when we bought this house and having like this play place in the backyard and a swing set and a slide and just playing in the backyard with the kids. It was just like so wonderful. It was honestly one of the greatest joys of my life to have kids, and I just loved it. And I embraced the role of dad. It was awesome. And then this little thing called COVID-19 happened. Anybody remember that? COVID happened in 2020, and in early 2019, like right when my third daughter was born. And I remember like I enjoyed waking up in the morning and like having the kids in the house and like doing the parent thing. And then, but also what was beginning to happen in this time, as I was experiencing this immense joy of being a dad and being a parent, I was also going through one of the most horrific times of my life. I was going through this thing, and the distress of what's known as gender dysphoria got worse and worse and worse. And this joy of becoming a parent was still there, but I was more and more distressed, and I became less and less able to engage with my child, with my kids. And I wanted to. I loved my kids. I looked forward to making memories and playing with my children, but my dysphoria just got so bad that I couldn't even engage in a single moment with my family. It was awful. But I loved being dad. Well, in 2022, I was working at a big mega church in Michigan, and I got outed by someone in my church. And my home life just became hell at that point. The prospect of being kicked out of my home because of my gender identity got way too real. And it became so difficult to walk through life. And I remember the moments where I started savoring every little second of the day because I feared it would be the last. I savored every bedtime with the kids because I was afraid that it would be the last one. And then I remember when we got separated, when our marriage, we separated, and I don't talk about my like marriage and things like that. I try to be respectful as I can. But I remember just the pain of that moment because of who I was, how I identified. I was now losing my marriage and losing access to my children at all times of the day. But when I finally came out publicly, a whole storm began to brew. And it was from somewhere I expected, but also didn't expect. One of the loudest voices of opposition came from someone who was a mentor to me for over 15 years of my life. He was a trusted pastor. This pastor was so instrumental in my faith formation when I was a young pastor. And then all of a sudden, because of who I was, because of how I identified, this pastor completely turned on me. When I came out publicly online, I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people congratulating me and hundreds of people condemning me from my churches. But what really shocked me was this pastor that I worked with for so long began to direct message people who were showing support to me. They were showing support to me, and they gave people fear for supporting who I was. Somebody sent me a screenshot, and I'm going to read it to you. I'm just going to straight up read to you what people said, what the pastor had said to people who supported me. This pastor said, "Hey, so-and-so, I hope you're well. I was a little surprised to see you encourage a post of my dead name about leaving his wife and kids. I just don't understand celebrating something so unholy and unwholesome and destructive to a family. I guess I'm just curious if you agree with this. I'm not here to argue with you, but I'm just genuinely curious." And the person came back and said, "I don't agree with your assessment of what is said." And then the pastor goes on and says, "Well, I thought it's best just to leave, do you think it's best to leave your wife and kids and pursue, do you think it would be best for me as a pastor to pursue SE, with other women? Or do you think that I should become a male S worker and just, roam the earth?" This is what the pastor's saying. And then blah, 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 keeps going on. And then just goes on to say that this pastor was disappointed with this person's support of me. Sadly, this is not an uncommon thing. I ended up sending a letter to the elders of the church calling for the pastor's resignation. And I never heard anything. But the problem is that hundreds of pastors do this on a daily basis. People from their congregations come out and pastors act like this. And my story is not isolated, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. So what do we do? How do we move forward? Because I never wanted to leave my family. I never wanted any of that to happen. But what do you do when people just throw unfair accusations at you? On the other side of the music, on the other side of our commercial break, we're going to talk more about this. And we're going to talk about some of the details and how to work through these things. And on the other side of that, we're going to take questions live on the podcast. So happy you're here. We'll be back right after these messages. Hey friends, it seems like everyone and their mom has a podcast these days, and everyone and their mom wants you to join their Patreon. So why on earth would you join my Patreon? Here's why. Our Patreon community is a little bit different because we are building a community of LGBTQ people and allies who need spiritual support. Let's be honest, many of my listeners may have a lot of distrust with clergy, and you need a place to talk safely with someone like me, a former pastor who is a trans woman. And we can really dive into some of the nitty-gritty of your experience. Go to patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY and join a whole community of people right now. That's patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. We would love to see you there. All right, friends, welcome back. And before the break, we were talking about just a little bit of my story and some of the crazy stuff I experienced at the hands of a pastor. But here's what I want to do. I want to focus in for a few moments, and here's what I want you to walk away with today. Is on this Father's Day, as we approach Father's Day when this is being recorded, what I want you to hear is that trans people can fulfill and be their full selves and fulfill their promises in life post-transition. This is what you need to hear. Trans people can still be and fulfill their life promise and purpose post-transition. And many people will say that you can't. And I need you to know, and as those things show up in the chats right now, it is total BS when someone tells you you can't. Because I'm living that life. I'm living that life. And I lived most of my life in the closet. For 34 years of my life, I lived in the closet. See, sexual identity and gender identity, they differ from some things in our world because these identities are not seen. They're not seen by the naked eye, right? Like being gay or being trans are not seen by the naked eye. So when they show up, it's a huge surprise to people and really throws off people's worldviews. You see, the concept of the closet is something that can help someone remain cloaked, metaphorically. The privilege of the closet, and really it was a privilege to be in the closet at times because I didn't have comment sections like I have now. I didn't get the barrage of hateful messages I get every single day when I was in the closet. But the privilege of the closet is that sexual identity and gender are not easily seen unless it is revealed by someone. And you see, someone can be trans in the closet, but the second they tell you and they're honest with who they are, that is when people come after you. And that is when the false narratives about you become so loud and vicious. But what you need to know is what you're seeing isn't always reality. The closet implies that everyone is cisgender and heterosexual, okay? But the epistemology of the closet is understanding that not every human being is exactly what you see. I was a pastor and I stood on a stage for years preaching freedom in Christ. Go and love the world. Go and sin no more. I preached on a stage week after week these topics, but the reality was not what people were seeing. What was happening underneath the facade of the fake church smile was a scared little girl who didn't want the world to know who she was. But I was in the closet. What you were seeing from stage isn't reality. And here's something you need to hear. Sometimes what you see on a church stage isn't real. And I'm telling you, as somebody who worked in megachurches for years, Most of what I produced as a pastor was manufactured joy, was manufactured. I'm just calling it what it is. And many ex-Christians, ex-pastors will tell you exactly this. And people that are in the world right now, that are pastors right now, are saying under their breath, yeah, isn't that right? And then they're saying publicly, well, you just never were. You just never were. And so for us, for those of us who lived in the closet for so long, leaving the closet was terrifying. If you're just joining the show, I will be taking questions in the next segment, and we'll be having conversations. I have people have texted in the show, had people asking that question. And if you listen not live, you can go to JOANNAWHALEY.com/live and text or leave voicemails at sometime during the week. But, getting back to it, but leaving the closet can be terrifying. Eve Sedgwick, a queer theorist, said this: the closet is a metaphor for hidden homosexuality. Sedgwick argues that despite the stigma and consequences of individuals who appear to conceal their gender or sexual identity, that people are most liberated when they leave the closet and close the door. I want to say that again. People are most liberated when they leave the closet and close the door. And I'm going to add, close the door forever. Here's another thing I want you to walk away with today. Trans people transition not to be happy, but to be healthy. People do not transition to be happy. One of the most BS things I heard from people after I came out was, God never promised you happiness. You're supposed to pick up your cross and follow Christ daily. You're supposed to just suffer until the day you die. And that's what I was taught in conversion therapy. I was taught to suffer until the day I die. But the reality is that no one in the trans community and no one who comes out of the closet is doing it to be happy. They're doing it to be healthy. There's a huge, huge difference. Surviving and enjoying life comes at a cost sometimes, though. Daniel Dennett, a philosopher, says, what makes us happy may not make us more prolific, which is all that matters to our genes. You see, all of us want to be important. A lot of us want to do something great in the world. I work with trans people all the time who wrestle with working through leaving their male privilege and then having to step into a woman's world where privilege is far from you. And you see, coming out sometimes solidifies our purpose. For me, in my process, coming out really did a lot of things for me. It didn't make me happy. I'm just going to be honest with you. It did not make me happy, but it did make me healthy. It made me a better parent. And I'll never forget sitting across from the kids when I came out to the kids, and they had questions, but all I did was answer the next question, right? And my children, and this is going to rile people up when I say this. I'm waiting to see the comment sections and the messages I get from this, right? But I told my children, and one of their questions was, are you still our dad? And I told my kids, I'll always be your dad. And this is my experience. This is my story. This isn't everyone's story. Some trans women, they transition and they become mom. But I identified with the role of dad. And my kids still call me dad today. It gets really, really funny. It gets really weird sometimes. And like, when I go into the restrooms and stuff, like, just trying to help my kids go to the bathroom and they're screaming, "Daddy, Daddy." That gets really interesting sometimes. But the reality is that my purpose as a parent was solidified when I came out. It slowed me down. My whole world just slowed down. Before, when I was an evangelical pastor, I was so consumed with success. Success was my way to hide what I was dealing with. Success was my way of wrestling with my gender. It was a way to ignore my gender. But when I came out as a trans woman, my purpose was solidified. Isaac Walton is a 14th, 15th century writer and an astrology hero. Astrology loves this guy. It says, look at your health. And if you have it, praise God and value it. To do a good conscience for your health is a second blessing that we mortals are capable of, and a blessing that money cannot buy. Money, there's nothing that has been better than my health. And my kids have said it. My family around me has said, "You're so much healthier now." And it's true. And it's a narrative that evangelical Christianity hates. It hates to see trans people thrive. But I'm here to tell you that trans people are thriving without your condemnation. And here's the last thing I'm going to say today. And then we're going to get to your questions after this next few moments here. Trans people do not abandon their roles to live when they come out. Trans people are, however, abandoned by their churches. Abandonment, rejection, and isolation from religious communities is a feature of being queer nowadays. The loss of community, the loss of jobs, the loss of everything in their faith systems, that is a feature that we deal with. But we need to realize that we haven't abandoned our lives and those we love. And those were the lies that were told to others about me. But here's the reality. I think about this coming Sunday, this Father's Day coming up, and my kids are excited to be here with me. I cannot wait to play the little games with the little figurines with my kids that I was never able to really do before I came out. Father's Day is not specifically just for cis-het men or even gay men. Trans women can also be dads. They can. So we need to stop with these unfair assumptions of trans people. Because when you meet one trans person, and I don't like this podcaster, and there's this evangelical guy, but I like one line he says. His name's Preston Sprinkle. He says, if you met one trans person, you've met one trans person. But I want you to hear that if somebody comes out as LGBTQ, no matter what part of that spectrum, they aren't abandoning their roles. Now, there are people that will, and there are people that do it, but there's also cis-het people that do it as well. Trans people can absolutely enjoy their lives and be healthy. On the other side of this commercial, I see we have people calling in. I'm going to get to you in just a second, right after this commercial. So stick on the line. If you have questions, send them in the chats. I will get to you in just a minute, and we are going to have a great conversation about this. We'll be right back after this.
To make me wear the proper clothes, I was deep down dark, felt like heaven froze. 'Cause in the mirror, I hate it all that I could see. Can't get it out of my head. Can't get it out of my head. I will never be straight, but you say I'll be great if it's out of my head.
Hey listeners, happy Pride Month. If you are a queer person and you this Pride Month are looking for a community of people to do life with and to grow spiritually with, even if that seems like something you've never been able to do before, you can do that right now. If you go to patreon.com/Joanna Whaley, you can join a whole group of LGBTQ people and allies who are trying to navigate this spiritual journey in step with their queerness. So do yourself a favor this Pride Month and go to patreon.com/Joanna Whaley. You can join for as little as $1.99 a month, all the way up to $9.99 a month, and join a community and have one-on-one conversations with me all the time. Happy Pride Month. We would love to see you in our community. Patreon.com/Joanna Whaley.
Are you awake, oh sleeper, call?
All right, welcome back to the podcast. Jeff, welcome in, friend. How are you today?
Hi. Thank you for letting me come in.
Yeah.
Happy Men's Mental Health Month.
Okay, that is happening. Yeah. Jeff, what are your thoughts right now? What do you want to talk about?
I mean, you're talking about Father's Day coming up, but
Yeah.
you're talking about how you identify as a scared little girl. Little girls can't be fathers.
So clearly you just joined the show. So tell me where you're getting that thought from.
Because biology.
Okay. What does my
Gender is set at birth. XXXY.
Hey,
You
Jeff.
can either produce sperm or you can't. You're either male or female. You can either be a man or a woman. So if you choose to reassign your gender, you choose to give up the rights of your birth gender. So if you choose to be a scared little girl, you can't be a father
Okay.
in the same breath.
So Jeff, here's what's going to
Yes-
happen.
yes,
here's
sir.
what's going to happen. We're not going to tolerate that on the show, okay? Because here's the thing. We can have respectful debate, but what we won't do, and that's for everyone who ever calls into this show, we can have conversations, but if we're going to be just rude and just be mean to one another, like if you're just going to call into the show and be mean, no thanks. And that's not productive. That's not how I operate. That's not how any of us should operate. And also, like, did you not ever teach your kids to not be the asshole in the playground? I don't know. Anyways, it looks like we have Mrs. Triss. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thanks so much for having me up.
Yeah, thanks for being here. What are your thoughts?
So I just had a question as to your identity. I'm also a trans woman, and I had a question as to your identity as a father or as a dad. Mm-hmm. So I am a parental aunt, so I take care of my nephew full time. But he does refer to me as his aunt just because that's how he's always known me. And so my question here is, with your children, do you have or allow them to call you dad because that's the role you still fulfill and you want to stay with that, or is it a comfort thing for them and just what they know?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so when I first came out to my children, and even when I started thinking about this before I came out, because, of course, I transitioned with 3 kids. I identify as dad, and I told my children at the very beginning, I am your dad. That is my role in your life, and they're little. So, but what I am going to do is I'm going to let my children, they know I'm their dad. I told them that will never change. But I am going to be open-handed and say, if, let's say, they get to high school and kids are just jerks to them or whatever because they have a trans dad. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen in 10 years, right? I'm going to allow my children to use language that is, one, safe for them and also helps them. And so I'm going to be open with that as they have been open with me. And so that's kind of my thoughts on that. But yeah, I feel that I fulfill the dad role in their life, and they see that. And so yeah, those are the reasons behind it. But I will allow my children to call me whatever they need to call me if it becomes a safety thing for them later on in life. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate you clarifying there for me.
That's a great question. Thanks for joining us. We have a lot of people calling in here. Let's see. We've got another one here. Welcome in, my friend. It looks like we have, it says, your golfer. Hello.
How's it going?
Good.
It's me again.
Hello. Is this Heather?
Yeah.
Who is this?
Yes, it is.
Hey, Heather. I got to remember your name on TikTok.
Yeah, I that's just me. But so I have a couple questions today.
Sure.
One to start off is we have Father's Day coming, which is it's a great holiday. I love it, especially because I can spoil my dad with whatever presents he wants, fishing rods, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as a person of faith, and we know it is, how do we open up more with the transgender community? How do we get people to understand more that you can still be a father, even if you were assigned at birth as a girl? You can still be a father figure.
So good. Yeah, I actually, I didn't even get to this in my first segment. In 1999, there was a trans man named Matt Rice. So good. There's a trans man named Matt Rice who gave birth to a child, kept his uterus, transitioned female to male.
Yep.
And, and the sad thing is that the funny thing is that parents and the relationships between parents and children are so special, and they're so unique, every family's different. So how kids interact with their parents is so different from family to family. And but it's outside forces that want people to comply, just like our first caller did, right? Our first caller wanted me to comply with his model of fatherhood. But yeah, absolutely. If and it is a mutual working process between parent and child. If I'm a dad, but I'm an abusive asshole, my kids will run away from me, and they won't. Their mom will find someone else, and you know what I'm saying. I lose that title to them, and so there's a mutuality between the parents, and I think it's wise for trans parents to have a mutual ongoing hey, I'm dad here, and we may just over time that may morph, and that's okay. That's a great question.
And my second question is, how do actual fathers, how do they need to be, I don't know how to say this, because a lot of fathers are not accepting of transgender kids. So I don't know how to explain this more better, except for saying, how to be a better father if you're going to have a transgender kid, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's great. And Heather, I'm going to hang up just because I got a lot of people and I'm going to answer the question. Okay?
Okay.
So I think, it is, what a great question. Because I went through this with my own father, and me and my dad have grown in a relationship. I would say that just having the willingness to learn, like, don't make assumptions of your child. If you're a dad and you have a kid that comes out as trans, the worst thing you can do, and even if they aren't trans, like any kid that comes out, like, don't make assumptions of them. That's the best thing you can do. Looks like we have Mason joining. Hi, Mason.
Hi, I have a quick question.
Sure. Bye-bye, Mason. So, these are great questions and some weird shit going on here today. That's fine. I've got some text questions that come in, and if you have questions, I do see folks in the queue that I'm just not going to answer because I've been watching their comments throughout the feed. If you have questions, if you want to chat about this, pride and religion and Father's Day, you can always go to JOANNAWHALEY.com or go to JOANNAWHALEY.com/live. You can text in, call in questions throughout the week. You can also go to TikTok and join me at Joanna Whaley Music and have a great conversation with me there. Looks like we have another person calling in here to the show. Hugo, welcome.
Hi.
How's it going? What are your
I'm
thoughts,
good.
friend?
Thoughts about what?
Did you know that you just requested to be a part of a chat about pride and religion?
Are you religious?
Yes. Yes, I am.
What religion are you in?
So I identify as Christian. I'm a progressive Christian.
So what does that mean?
I would just encourage you to Google it. We're going to move on here. Our next friend. All right, I'm going to take some phone calls here, or some texts that came in this week. Hunter from Taylor, Michigan. That's right down the street from where I live. Okay. Hunter from Taylor, Michigan. Hi, Joanna. I am a closeted gay man in lower level leadership in my local church. I hear some of the staff at my church make jokes about things being, quote, so gay. I have been in the closet for a while and this has been making me feel unsafe, and it makes me want to leave the church. I have a hard time with progressive theology, however, and the style of churches in the area. But the church I am in is getting more and more homophobic. What would your input be? Whew, that's tough. Yeah, Hunter, thanks. I hope I don't know you, but it's this is hard because a lot of churches, they're very like, hey, we love everybody. But then like what happens is like sometimes you find out in the back rooms the heart of the people. And sometimes that heart is really really awful. And so, Hunter, my biggest thoughts here is just to look, there's a lot of churches, and here's what you're going to have to do. If you're coming from like big mega churches, you're really going to be taking a different worship style. But here's my thoughts. I would rather have an inclusive, loving environment that includes me for who I am than have good music that hates my very existence. So these are the trade-offs. So like go to more concerts. That would be my input for you. So Hunter, thank you. And if you really are in Taylor, which is like right down the street from me, reach out to me, Joanna Whaley Music, or go to JOANNAWHALEY.com and find my contact info there. We are going to get to more calls on the other end of this podcast. Thank you. This has been a production of Whaley Media. We'll see you on Wednesday.